Have you ever had fear around giving a public speech? Thank you. Yes, we have all heard that people actually fear public speaking more than death. And as Jerry Seinfeld said, that means people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. At first, I had no fear of speaking, public speaking. My first experience, I had been invited to speak at a film group and to share the film trailer I had made to try and encourage people to donate money to help me finish my film. And I arrived there with no other plan than to show the trailer and just to wing it. I had no idea what I was getting into. The film trailer was only 4 minutes long. That meant I had 56 minutes to fill. I get up in front of the audience, expecting my mind to be full of ideas, and it was completely blank. Fortunately, the promoter took pity on me and said, let's turn this into a question and answer session. And pretty soon, the hour was over. And I took this approach to all my speaking gigs for the next 10 years. That is, I would show my film, I would have questions that people would do in breakout rooms, and then we would have a conversation. That's what I thought public speaking was. Then when I became a coach, I learned there was actually a blueprint for giving a public speech. There was a beginning, there were 3 data points, and there was an ending. And I felt like it had opened this whole door for me. Fortunately, my first speeches were 20 minutes long or longer, kind of this accordion thing. And I got really good at it because I would have my outline and I would give my speech and it was fine. But then I wasn't getting the results I wanted, and I joined Toastmasters. And then I learned about speaking fear. So let's talk a little bit about fear of speaking. First, we're going to talk about what kind of things bring up fear of speaking. Then we're going to talk about what fear of speaking feels like. And then finally, we're going to look at how you can reduce your fear of speaking. So let's start out with what causes fear of speaking. New situations. Guess what? Joining Toastmasters was a whole new situation. Suddenly, I had to go from giving 20-minute, hour-long speeches to 7-minute speeches. How am I going to fit all that into 7 minutes? First, I tried to speak faster, but that didn't work. People didn't understand what I was saying. And my mentor kept on saying, you need to put in more pauses so people understand what you're saying. But I was afraid of giving the pause because if I hit the pause button, I might stop my brain. So the next thing I did was, well, I'll tell you that when I talk about how you reduce your fear. The other thing that affects or precipitates fear is interruptions. I have 2 experiences of that. I was giving a speech at the International Speech Contest at the division level. I had practiced my speech and practiced it, and I really knew it. I knew it perfectly. And I'm giving my speech, and I'm ready, and I'm going, and I'm heading towards that runway, towards the end. And my cell phone starts ringing. My cell phone never rings. Nobody ever calls me on my cell phone. I forgot it was on. And it's ringing and ringing. And I tried to give my speech, continue to give my speech while it's ringing. And I'm starting to get a little distracted. But I don't know how to turn it off. So I throw it to the ground. And mercifully, it stops. But now my brain is like exploding. I take a few breaths. I get back to the speech. Unfortunately, I time out. I do not go on to the district level. That was my first experience. My second experience that really started to teach me about fear of public speaking was I was in the evaluation contest the next year. And this was going to be our first time after COVID when we would have a live speech contest at the district level. So I arrived there. I've been practicing at all these live clubs, giving real speeches in front of real people. And I find out that the speaker is on video. And you know what? He has a bad reception. So I can't understand half of what he's saying. And also, he has a heavy accent. Nevertheless, I go off to my room and I write my speech out and I come out and I'm ready to go. And I get on stage and I start giving it. And the tech guy comes over and interrupts me to give me a microphone. Well, all my thoughts, all my speech fell out of my brain. And I kind of got through the end of the speech. So that is the kind of thing that can activate that fear, that brain freeze. But here's the thing. Things like that happen. If you are a public speaker and you're speaking anywhere besides Toastmasters Club and probably other Toastmasters clubs, things happen. They give you the wrong direction. You arrive there and they have different rules. You don't know where you're supposed to stand, whether you're supposed to stay at the podium because that's where the camera is or what's going on. And you have to adapt. And sometimes technology breaks down and you have to be prepared. So what do? Well, before we go there, let's talk about how you know you're experiencing fear. Of course, Toastmasters gives you the usual examples of how you feel fear, such as fast heartbeat or low, slow, well, actually difficult breathing. What did I feel when I was there in front giving the evaluation speech contest? Maybe sort of frozen, maybe lightheaded, dizziness. But there are other kinds of indications that you have fear, such as not being able to get off your script. That's a really good sign that maybe you need to have some more work in developing that confidence that you can speak without reading your script. Yes, I know you fall in love with your words, but you need to break away from that. And the other kind of fear that comes up is fear of being vulnerable, being yourself, allowing people to judge you, and that's okay. And that was one of the issues I actually had to deal with before I really became a good speaker. Okay, now you've been waiting for it. How do we deal with fear? I'm going to talk about 3 things that you should focus on. First, how do you prepare for speaking? Then what do you do when you arrive at your speaker location, what you need to do? And finally, what you need to do to handle fear when you actually give the speech. Before you give your speech, when you are preparing your speech, the first thing you want is a good structure for your speech. You want to have a gripping or grabbing beginning. You want to tell people what you're going to speak about. Then you have basically 3 points because people don't remember more than 3 points. And then you want to summarize and have a closing or call to action. So this is your template, your structure, your roadmap. And then any speech can kind of be dropped in those places. So the next thing I recommend, which I haven't really been doing here because it's harder on Zoom, but I have done it, is you want to block your speech. That is, you start in the middle, and then in your first point, you go over to your right and everybody else's left and make your first point. And then your second point, which is not where I am, I'm in my third point, which is what you do when you actually give your speech. So I should be over here, right? And the reason to do that is that your speech actually gets embodied in your body, and you start to remember what you're doing based on where you are. In addition, you want to practice your speech. I practice my speech many, many times, but I practice it while I'm walking so that I don't practice exact words. I get the sense of what my speech is. And 7 minutes long, I may give it 3 or 4 times as I'm walking. And I give it in so many different ways that when I finally give the speech, I'm not attached to any particular word. I know what I want to say, and then it can flow. And if I don't remember a particular word, it doesn't matter. I have another word that's available. And finally, you need to time your speech so that you make sure that your speech fits into the time that you have. So that's all prep. That's number one. We're over here, number one, right? Number two, when you arrive at the location. Now, first of all, make sure that you've got the right directions, or you might freak out on the way if you have been given the wrong directions to where you're going. But if it's Zoom, not a problem. All you need to do is make sure you have the right Zoom link. When you arrive, you want to make sure that all the tech works. Is the audio working? Is the video working? You want that all taken care of. And you also want to know what the landscape is. If it's in person, you want to know what your stage area is. If they have this podium and that's where the camera is, you need to know whether that's a wide angle camera or not, or otherwise you're going to be pasted to that podium. Okay, so now you're set to go. You might want to talk to some people to get a feel of the room and what kind of people you're going to be talking to. This will help relax you too, because you're with people that feel safe, maybe. And then you want to sit down and you want to breathe. Deep, slow, relaxing breaths to enter your body and get out of your head. Get out of the lower brain stem so that you're up in your sage brain, so that when you give your speech, you are giving it from a place of strength and confidence. And for those of you who remember my other speech, you could do what's called a PQ rep. You could rub your two fingers together and focus on what they feel like. And sense the finger ridges on your fingers. And this will ground you in your body. Okay. Number three, you go on stage. You look at the audience. You pause. You do not just jump into your speech. You pause and you look at your audience. You may look in the eyes of one or two of the people. And then you start your speech. Now you have grounded and you're ready to go. You give your speech. Maybe you forget something. My mentor told me, wiggle your toes. And that usually grounds you again and helps you remember what you need to say. And assume that what you remember or what you think next is probably even more important than what you plan to say. Finally, when you end the speech, wait a moment. Don't race off the stage. Let people respond to your speech. That will help your self-confidence. So those are my 3 points for today. What causes fear, how fear shows up, and what you can do to reduce your fear when you give your public speaking. And remember that you need to be fluid and you need to activate that right side of your brain, the sage brain, when you're going to give a speech. That will help you immensely in giving the best speech you possibly can. My final recommendation to you is give a lot of speeches. The more you speak, the easier it becomes.